I am Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing this fine day? I hope well. Your Steelers are doing quite well, and they are in the driver's seat in the AFC North, if not better. And I really think, after further reflection on this game, that priority number one on both sides of the ball was no negative plays, limit the negative plays, and kind of let the Browns be the Browns and screw it up with missed kicks and interceptions and things that they've shown that they do with some regularity. And by that means, I think they executed very well, especially when you take Pickens out of the equation. That's a challenge. So as we always do on this podcast, we're going to go over snap counts. The Browns ones I thought were interesting were Jerome Ford outsnapped Nick Chubb in this game 40-26. That was really the only one on offense I thought was interesting. But Myles Garrett, who usually plays a very high percentage of snaps, only played 49 snaps out of a possible 65. I mean, not a huge deal, but he didn't do a whole heck of a lot in this game either. On defense for the Steelers. I'm sorry, on offense for the Steelers. Again, possible 65 snaps. The entire O-line and Wilson all played 65. Nobody missed anything. But Van Jefferson led the way with receiver snaps. We'll talk about more of the receiver distribution here in a bit. But he was at 48. Freiermuth at 40. Much better than it was early in the season. Darnell Washington in 38. So there was obviously a lot of double tight end sets and also 13 as well, 13 personnel. Scott Miller was out there for 34 snaps. Didn't even know if he's going to be, didn't think he'd be active for this game. Warren outsnapped Najee 34-27, and frankly was the better player. Only 23 snaps for Calvin Austin, compared to 34 for Scott Miller. But again, we'll get to that in a minute. Pruitt with 20, Skowronek with 20, Mike Williams with 19, right behind those guys. Connor Hayward, only 11. That's about what I want to hear. Cordell Patterson, only 9. That's about enough for him as well. And my favorite, Minkah Fitzpatrick with 2 in the victory formation. Now, out of a possible 72 defensive snaps, Minkah, Queen, and Porter didn't miss a snap. Watt played 64. And now I'm sure he has total power over how much he plays, when he goes in and when he goes out, etc. But considering the depth of the offensive line position, I don't want him getting too beat up. I wouldn't mind Watt playing less. Elliott played 63, very good snaps. Bishop played 58. I mean, they're a heavy 11 team, but clearly he's back to being the nickelback. Dante Jackson, 53. He left the game, but it was only back spasms, nothing to be concerned of there. I love that Keanu Benton played 50 snaps. Now, part of that's because Ogunjobi was injured in this game. We'll get to that again, but I don't think that's going to be serious as either. But maybe this is a trend where Benton starts to really eat up a big snap count because he played great. Cam Hayward played 44, 42 for Highsmith, 36 for Loudermilk. Again, that's a direct reflection on the Ogunjobi situation. Peyton Wilson with 35, Nick Herbig with 31, Roberts played 28, 19 for Preston Smith, 17 for James Pierre, 14 for KZ, only 13 for Sutton, which he has not been great, and 9 for Ogunjobi before his injury, so that he didn't last long. I didn't realize it was that short a stretch, to be honest with you, until seeing these. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, to NHL, to UFC, to MMA. Head to BetOnline today and get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Mentioned Myles Garrett didn't play quite as much as usual, but, and I'm not sure I quite agree with this. I mean, his stat line looks bad, but of course, like TJ, he always influences the game. He had a sack late when it didn't, or a fumble recovery late when it wasn't, super relevant. But yeah, well, I guess that's not fair. But Myles Garrett recorded 4 pressures and a sack on 21 pass rushes in Week 14 against the Steelers. That's a 19% pressure rate. After totaling 8 pressures and 3 sacks in their Week 12 matchup, Garrett was matched up on Dan Moore of 14 of his 21 pass rushes, generating 3 pressures, including his 1 sack across from those matchups. I guess that's fair. I didn't chart every Myles Garrett snap, of course. They did. This is Next Gen from NFL.com. But I didn't think he was impactful as those several sentences I just read really reflect. How about Russell Wilson, though? He was 15 of 26 for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Browns. We know that. But completing all 8 of his attempts for 80 yards and both touchdowns in the seams, where he's not considered, his strengths. So did really well throwing down the seam. Wilson's average time to throw of 2.64 seconds was his quickest of the season. He completed 10 of his 14 quick pass attempts. That's under 2.5 seconds for 97 yards and a touchdown. We talked about Scotty Miller. He hadn't caught a pass since the Steelers beat the Chargers in Week 2. He had just 2 targets, both against the Giants, since then, and has been inactive for several of those games. He averaged 2.92 yards per route run, though, in this game. That's a massive number. I know it's a small sample. He didn't play a ton. But he gave you more than you could ever ask for a guy that thought he was going to be inactive an hour before the game that hasn't caught a pass since Week 2. It's good stuff. I mean, just contributors. No Steelers pass catcher had a better than a 72% route share against the Browns. So the most any of their receivers played was 72% of the routes. Mike Williams ran just 13 routes. That's a 45% route participation, tying him for 3rd on the team. But, like Miller, he did produce 2.77 yards per route run. Like 2.92, 2.77 for Miller and Williams, respectively, would have you near the top of the league, just to put that in context. Now, again, small sample size, 13 routes. But he did come through when used and when allowed to be out there. Maybe that leads to more, I don't know. As we talked about, Warren outsnapped Najee 34-27, but Harris did not have a target. And I thought Warren, Russell Wilson aside, was pretty clearly the Steelers' best offensive player in this game. I stick it in the backfield. I know it's a small sample size, but I mentioned, his number of snaps is fine, but Cordarrelle Patterson, to me, looks heavy, looks sluggish. Doesn't look very elusive. Looks very straight line-ish to me as running backs go. Not real low to the ground either. Now, I didn't love the Steelers' overall running production in this game, top to bottom. But I do think it's noteworthy that they did average 4.8 yards per carry in the first half. And why do I say that? Because the second half, when they really went into clock-killing mode early, they ran a lot into loaded boxes. They had some kneel downs at the end of games. So when you look at the yards per carry over the course of the game, it's skewed a little. I mean, it just is. I still want more from this running game. I want more consistency. I want 4.8 for the game. But when it was a neutral situation, they ran the ball better than you might have thought. Jameis Winston, he was 24 of 41, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. But he completed 3 of his 6 attempts for 52 yards and a touchdown when passing from outside the pocket. He came in the league as a heavy-footed, thicker guy. He has really cut weight. He's really got better throwing on the move. And I thought that he became hard to sack. The Steelers had a hard time tracking him down at times. He's now thrown for 372 yards outside the pocket since becoming the starter in Week 8. Second most in the NFL over this span. So this isn't a Steelers problem. This is a problem he's been presenting for everyone. He was also pressured on 35.6% of his dropbacks and has now faces 2 highest pressure rates of the season in the 2 matchups against the Steelers. Week 12 was at 48.3%. He completed 6 of his 13 such attempts for 59 yards, a touchdown, interception while being sacked 3 times. I also think a lot of those throwaways, he was lucky to, because his feet are getting so good, avoid a tackler or a sack, throw it away, and just be happy with a 0 because it could have gone a lot worse. Really, if he wasn't better on the move and evading pressure, this may have been a 6-sack game for the Steelers. Kind of had that feel, and it certainly influenced Winston quite a bit. TJ Watt generated 6 pressures on his 39 pass rushes, tying his season high in pressures, 6 pressures. Watt generated 4 of his pressures across 29 matchups against Jack Conklin, after Conklin held Watt to just 1 pressure on 24 matchups the last time they met. So 4 pressures in 29 this time, 1 pressure in 24 in Week 12. Watt has now generated 11 pressures over his last 2 weeks after entering Week 13, having generated an 8.9 pressure rate, his lowest since 2018. So he's getting after it the last 2 weeks, I guess is the short of that. Again, getting back to the Winston thing, I meant to say this earlier, but they did sack him 3 times. They hit him 6 times and hurried him into a number of bad throws and throwaways, overthrows, rushing, 16 pressures overall. They intercepted Watson twice and turned Cleveland over on downs. They limited the Browns to 2 third-down conversions on 13 attempts. Pretty darn good work. I have no concerns about this player, but I didn't think Herbig brought much to the table. I mean, I don't think being, quote, demoted behind Highsmith, who was great, mattered all that much, but he just didn't do a whole lot in this game. And their left tackle, Affetti, he was pretty awful. So maybe would have liked to see more from Herbig, but again, I have no concerns at all. I also wanted to mention Elliott and Queen keep battling for the tackle lead amongst the Steelers defenders, and this was a very good game by both. One of Queen's best games. An awful lot of production, just tackles, assists, etc., but also really showing up on tape with his speed, his lateral or sideline to sideline abilities. And obviously we saw some good things from Roberts as well, but I thought it was a real strong game from all 3 linebackers, including Peyton Wilson. And last thing, weather was nice, but it's still December in Pittsburgh. And Waitman averaged 52.3 yards per punt. I thought he was really, really good in this game. Now, getting ahead of ourselves, but I probably should have double-checked this. I didn't plan on even talking about it, but Johnston's contract, I think he signed a 2-year deal, and he was awesome. But do you have 2 really good punters? I mean, do you just let Waitman walk? I'd love to just not walk away from this guy. He's been really, really good. So your Steelers are pretty darn good. We will probably do a mailbag tomorrow. If you want to hit me up on Twitter at Williamson NFL. I started this morning digging into Eagles stuff and, newsflash, they're really good. Not a shock there. And that's a wrap for today. Take care.